There was a reference here to Patriot missiles. Will these be essentially defensive weapons in this first tranche for Ukraine?
Yeah, well, it's good to be with you. This is obviously exciting news, something we've been working on since the announcement last month in the Oval Office, where I was there with President Trump and Secretary General Rutte, and the announcement of $578 million worth of American weapons and munitions sold to the Netherlands and then provided to Ukraine is a big step forward. And this is probably the first announcement of many that are going to be following on. But, I think should expect that, weapons and munitions obviously are defensive, especially when you're talking about Patriot missile and radar and those types of things. But you can also, see that most expectedly there will be things like artillery shells and bullets and ammunition.
And how quickly will all of that, Ambassador, be in the hands of Ukraine now that this purchase has been announced?
Well, obviously, we're moving out very fast, in expectation of this. And after the announcement, the folks that are doing the logistics have already had some of this material in process. And so it's moving in the typical channels that you would expect. I just want to say that, while this announcement of the Netherlands purchasing American equipment is important, remember why they're doing this. It's because Ukraine wants American equipment. Ukraine wants our weapons and our ammunition because it's the best in the world. And, a lot of it is manufactured in the United States. And that's why, one of the things that I'm working on here at NATO is to make sure that American manufacturing continues to thrive and grow and expand. And, those are really hand in glove as to what we're doing and the work we're doing here to make sure that Europe can ultimately defend itself long term.
Well, let's talk more about that, because there was a concern about our own stockpiles here, which is why at one point, at least that was the justification by the Pentagon for halting temporarily weapons shipments to Ukraine, because we were getting down to concerning levels. At this point here, if we're in fact providing more weaponry to Ukraine, realizing that others are paying for it, is there a limit to what we can send?
Well, yes, there is. And we want to make sure that the United States is never at a strategic disadvantage or puts ourselves in a vulnerable position. And so what we're providing is what would be considered excess in addition to what we need to defend ourselves strategically. But at the same time, we're still manufacturing, whether it's missiles that go with the Patriot system, or whether it's artillery shells or everything in between. All of these armaments are continue to be manufactured in the United States and, quite frankly, all across the NATO alliance. And so we see the need in Ukraine. We then, the people at the Pentagon, especially the generals that manage a lot of these important programs, looked and determined what we could sell to our NATO allies, and then they could provide them to Ukraine.
As you see it, Ambassador, when we consider the situation in Ukraine and a war that Russia has signaled no desire to stop at this time, despite the president's consistent push for a ceasefire, are sanctions needed to supplement this further weaponry, even secondary sanctions perhaps, which the president has suggested could go into place as soon as the end of this week with the 10-day deadline he announced last week?
Yeah, well, President Trump's been clear that this war needs to end, that the death and carnage and slaughter we're seeing on the battlefield every single day, where thousands of soldiers are dying, and, of course, the attacks into some cities inside Ukraine as well, where civilians are ending up being casualties. It needs to end. There's no resolution on the battlefield. A diplomatic solution is the only way. And President Trump is creating the environment that Russia will come to the table and negotiate a ceasefire, because that's what's necessary to end the killing. And I think secondary sanctions and tariffs against those that are paying for this war, like China, India, and Brazil, by buying the oil that Russia is producing, is an obvious next step to try to bring this war to an end. And we'll see, President Trump said just the other day that Russia is very good at avoiding sanctions and evading these things. But I think this is going to really hit them where it counts, and that is in their main revenue source, which is the sale of oil to these countries. And so President Trump, is playing this card, if Russia can't negotiate a ceasefire. But at the same time, Russia just needs to end this war. They're not going to win it on the battlefield. They're making marginal, if any, gains. And they've really been struggling because of the situation on the front line. And so we just need to end this war. And I think these sanctions are the next step. But again, President Trump's going to continue to work on creating the environment that's necessary to bring Russia to the table and to get a ceasefire.
Is there anything, when we consider the weapon shipments that we will not send to Ukraine, Ambassador? I remember the big debates that were had over the shipping of F-16s, providing M1 Abrams tanks, ATACMS missiles, and so forth. If somebody else is placing the order and doing the buying, do we care what they get?
Well, obviously, I'd say the rule number one is the United States will not make ourselves strategically vulnerable in any way. So we're not going to, cut too deep or give amounts or sell amounts that are going to put us at a strategic disadvantage. But we're going to make sure that Ukraine has everything they need to defend themselves. They have, like the way the U.S. Air defense systems, especially, have performed as they're every night attacked by drones and missiles and all the things that Russia is sending their way. And so, they obviously want more of those systems because they know they work and they know that they're very successful in eliminating those threats. But at the same time, they need to be able to defend themselves on the front line where they're encountering the Russians and the waves of poorly trained Russian soldiers that are being paid a significant amount of money in expectation that most likely they're going to die. It's really a sad situation on the front line, and we just need to end it. President Trump sees that for what it is, and let's just hope that as we take steps into August here, we can get this war to a ceasefire.
Ambassador, just quickly before we let you go, President Trump announced on Friday that he would be deploying 2 nuclear subs into an appropriate region in order to counteract what he saw as escalatory rhetoric coming from Russia. Can you confirm whether or not those subs actually have been deployed? And do NATO allies worry about that kind of escalatory move?
No, I'm not going to confirm our strategic movement of any submarines. Obviously, that's one of the many systems we have available that make us very strong as a country and provide the necessary strategic ambiguity that we can move things around. And submarines obviously are very important to what's in our arsenal. But, there's no reason for me to talk about any of those things right now.